Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you're coming back for another episode of Mondays with Mundy. And you're looking at him. My name is Jim Mundy, and I am the historian for the Union League Legacy Foundation. So if you're watching this the week of November 23rd, we're going to talk about the room at the Union League because we are about to celebrate its 103rd anniversary. And I'm speaking specifically about what we call the Lincoln Memorial Room, which was dedicated officially November 24th, 1917. So, and if anybody's ever been in the league as a guest or as a member, it is, I think, probably the most memorable room because there's nothing else like it in any other clubhouse or even rooms perhaps in the country. It is just absolutely that amazing. So let's get into the story about it. All right. So we go back to February the 20th of 1915. And this is probably a good time to bring up the PowerPoint. So let me start the sharing. So it's February 20th, 1915. All right. And there was a dinner at the league in honor of a member named George P. Morgan, who was one of the league's probably most famous members. And Morgan was a Medal of Honor winner, Cold Creek, August 1864. So a renowned Civil War veteran. And at this dinner stood up none other than Edwin Stewart, who at that point was not only a past president of the league, but he was also a former mayor of Philadelphia and governor of Pennsylvania. So when Edwin Stewart said something, everybody listened. Okay. And what Stewart suggested was that here they are gathered at the Union League of Philadelphia, founded as a patriotic society in 1862 during the American Civil War. And here is one of its great patriots in the membership himself, George Morgan. And so patriotism was important still at this point in time. And so Stewart suggesting that let's do something even more patriotic. Let's acknowledge the contributions of not just Morgan, but all the other members who were veterans from the Civil War and who were members of the League. And as you can imagine, that suggestion met with rousing approval. So the idea made it to the board of directors, which approved it immediately, and they went about creating what they called the Memorial Room. So that's what we're going to talk about now. Okay. So we call it the Lincoln Memorial Room, but originally it was just the Memorial Room, hence Lincoln in the parentheses. All right. So this is what the room looks like, and it is still a breathtaking room, right? So Stewart suggested a number of things. He suggested that there be a statue of Abraham Lincoln. After all, he was the savior of the country, right? Salvatore. And on top of that, he also suggested that Lincoln's Gettysburg Address be included on a wall somewhere, and that there be tablets with the names of the Union League members who were Civil War veterans, and that they be engraved, quote, in enduring bronze, unquote, forever. And so Stewart pretty much got his way. Now, the board, if you will, they didn't punt this, but they kind of delegated the responsibility for creating this memorial room to the Art Association, which was organized in 1882 as a committee that would help beautify aesthetically the clubhouse by acquiring paintings and sculptures and pieces of decorative art as well. And who better than to create this kind of a space itself? And so the Art Association, as you can imagine, went out to a few sculptors with whom it was familiar who were in Philadelphia, including Henry Kirkbush Brown, who did that wonderful high relief on the first floor of the Broad Street building, the memorial tablet to the League's white Civil War regiment. All right. They approached another sculptor in Philadelphia named Charles Grafley, and then they approached Jacob Otto Schweitzer. And Schweitzer is a really interesting man. He was born in Zurich, Switzerland, but even as a young man, before he even graduated from high school, he knew he wanted to be an artist or a sculptor in some way, shape, or form. And so he left school and went to Dresden in Germany, and then Florence in Italy, where he could study among some of the great masters of the time. And as an accomplished young man, then he came to the United States in, when did he come over here? 1894. Landed in New York, but then came to Philadelphia a year after in 1895, and he stayed in Philadelphia the rest of his life. And it was Schweitzer's concept for the memorial room that really caught the imagination of this committee, and so he won the commission. Now, Stewart's original concept was to put the Lincoln sculpture in the middle of the room. Now, that pretty much makes the room useless, for anything ever. So Schweitzer, as you can see, moved the whole tableau of that you see in front of you onto the west wall. Okay, so originally this room, by the way, is on the second floor of the 15th Street building, so it's the far west end of the clubhouse. Okay, all right, but on the north side. So the windows you see on the right-hand side, that would be Sansom Street on that side. All right. Okay, so there were originally two sets of doors on the west wall that led into the main reading room behind it, which is still there. And so Schweitzer then removed those doors and created this tableau, which is just phenomenal. So you have the central niche with his sculpture of Abraham Lincoln. You have 8 bronze tablets that contain the 531 names of Union League members who were Civil War veterans up to 1917. And at that point in time, believe it or not, when they dedicated the room, there were 125 members still alive who were Civil War veterans. Pretty amazing, right? Above the tablets, you see 8 bronze medallions, also done by Schweitzer, and they are bas-reliefs of 7 Union generals and 1 Union admiral, but all Union. And above that, in carved gilt into the wall itself, is Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And that was the memorial room. Now, the stained glass windows were designed by an Italian immigrant to Philadelphia named Nicola Diacenzo. And Diacenzo arguably had the best stained glass studio in Philadelphia in the first half of the 20th century. Mostly church glass and things like that, but phenomenal stuff, and very appropriate to the tone of the room itself. So this is the room as it was dedicated on November 24th, 1917. And it was a Saturday, by the way. All right. Now, as you can imagine, I forgot one thing, and forgive me for this. In the niche, behind Abraham Lincoln, you see, maybe you can't, well, maybe you'll get a close-up later on, 3 words in Latin, Amor Patriae Ducit. And that is the motto of Union League, which translated in English means love of country leads. And that is still the philosophical peg that we hang our hat on every day, 7 days a week, all year round at the League itself. So love of country leads. All right, so let's get on. What happens next? Okay, so this is Schweitzer himself. This, as you can see, was born during the American Civil War, ironically enough, lived a good life. And this is Schweitzer in 1910. So this is pretty much how he looked when he received the commission for the room. Now, Schweitzer at this point, he actually worked as a lithographer when he came to Philadelphia, believe it or not. He wasn't immediately active in the art community itself. But in 1911, he won a commission for a bronze sculpture of General Johann Peter Gabriel Muhlenberg, which stood on the apron at City Hall for many, many years before being moved up to the Art Museum area. And quickly, he became known as a modeler of military memorials. And he would eventually do the State Memorial to Colored Soldiers that now is on the Parkway in front of the Franklin Institute, for instance. So, so Schweitzer won the commission, and I don't think anybody would suggest that he didn't do a wonderful job at it. Okay, so that is Jacob Otto Schweitzer. All right. Now, the tablets. How do you get those names? Well, they created a committee. That's what we do at the League. We have committees. And so they created a committee on the Memorial Room tablets chaired by General R. Dale Benson, and they sent out a pamphlet that you see here in front of you with the names of all the members that they thought at that point in time were veterans of the Civil War and still the membership itself. So they're asking the members, please check the list for accuracy. Let me know if there were any mistakes. We'll correct them if there are, subtract, add, and things like that. So they were very, very conscious of the responsibility they had in getting these names right. So, and then, now keep in mind it's 1917. The United States is now part of the Allied effort in World War I. So things were were being done a little bit on the quiet side, if you will. So this is the invitation to the dedication ceremony itself. You can see it's Saturday evening, November 24th, 1917. And the speaker was actually a justice from the Supreme Court of Ontario, Honorable William Renwick Riddle, who had quite a reputation as an intellectual. He was an author, wrote 16 books, over 1,000 articles. and really quite an interesting character. So this is the memorial pamphlet or book that was published of Riddle's speech after that evening. And it's actually a better read than you might realize. I was surprised myself. So, and here's the justice himself. All right. Looking down from 30,000 feet, if you will, as a Canadian, I mean, obviously he had very different observations of the American Republic, democracy, and especially the Civil War itself. But he made an interesting comment that when talking with many of his acquaintances and friends who were from the American South, and again, we're talking the early 20th century here, he said that from their perspective, the war wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights. And of course, even he had to reply that no, it was about slavery. So interesting man. So he knew his history as well. So he was the speaker, and interesting looking guy. All right. So here we have some images of the room itself as it has progressed, if you will, over the years. When I went to the League, when I started working at the League in May of 1978, it was still held as a sacred space, to be honest. The only function that really took place in there on a regular basis were board of director meetings. Not much else. It was not part. It wasn't used for food and beverage as it is today, but it was still a very kind of like a holy of holies almost, if you will. And here you can get an idea of what that was. Not even a carpet on the floor, a rug, but you get the idea of what it looked like. So this is a photograph, undated, unfortunately, but I'm guessing from the mid-1950s. And I put this in. This is the library lounge, which is across the hall from the Lincoln Memorial Room. But I put it in specifically so you could look at the rear wall of the room, because that's originally what the wall in the memorial room would have looked like prior to its reinvention as the memorial room itself. So you can see what those doors looked like at the west end of the room. And that's why I put that in there. So here we have another photograph. This one, I believe, is circa 1962 from the League Centennial. All right. Still have some of those chairs around too, believe it or not, as is the table. But this gives you a different perspective on the room, perhaps. Not very colorful, but still, you get the idea though that it's still very much a space unlike any other in the house. Here we have the central niche, and there you can see behind Lincoln those three words, Amor Patriae Ducit, right? And it's a wonderful, I think it's a great sculpture of Abraham Lincoln. Like everything else, there are some really bad sculptures of Lincoln, and then there are some really good ones. We're very lucky to have some very good ones in the League's art collection. And this one by Schweitzer is really very, very good. It's a really remarkable likeness of Lincoln. And so this is Schweitzer's interpretation of Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address, right? I'm not sure Lincoln would have had quite such a stern look in his face, or maybe even a clenched fist, because it's really not quite the tone of the address itself. But nonetheless, though, it is a very memorable image of Lincoln. And the pedestal that you can see, if you will, or the base, because it's all in bronze, has four figurative panels that include life, liberty, government, and nature, right? It was Stuart's original intention that the pedestal simply have the words, he is now, Edward McMaster Stanton's quote from the deathbed on April the 15th of 1865. Now he is in the ages. So, but as you can see, Stuart didn't get his way. I thought this was really interesting. So I mentioned that for many, many decades, the room was used for board of directors meetings, and that's what we have here, sitting in the middle. So this is also 1962, because in the middle, at the far end of the table, is the club president, Thomas B. McCabe, and his vice presidents and his board of directors. And it's interesting in that when I went to the League in 1978, half those men were still alive, and interesting stuff. So, and then we have the east wall of the room itself. And regretfully, the east wall doesn't get as much notice or photographs, which is a shame, because one of Stuart's other intentions in the memorial room was to use it to display all the league's many memorials from the war itself, including battle flags, arms, muskets, swords, uniforms, whatever it had. And it had quite a collection of them, three-dimensional. And so these cases were designed to hold those memorials. And so now they are on the east wall, flanking that fireplace, as you can see. And if you look at the cornice at the top of those display cases, you can see those different symbols, right? Those are Civil War Union Army Corps insignia, right? Okay, so in the Civil War, you went from a company to a regiment, to a brigade, to a division, to a corps. So the corps was the largest body of soldiers, and every corps had its insignia. And the soldiers wore a patch, sometimes on their kepis, their hats, or sometimes on their uniforms, with that insignia so they could be identified by the corps itself. So that was a pretty ingenious inclusion into these cases. And you can see we have an exhibit in there. I just took these images last week, and you can see that we have an exhibit in there on Lincoln and his leaders. So there's U.S. Grant on the left-hand side in that wonderful portrait. Okay, and here we have the two cases side by side. So, and they are really wonderful cases. All right. And then to show that we still use the memorial room for board meetings and board functions. Actually, probably the biggest day of the year at the League House is January the 1st. We have an open house where we invite all the members to come in and just have a big New Year's Day party. And it is spectacular. Anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 members and their families and their guests come in every New Year's Day. And one of the great traditions that we have is a receiving line to welcome the new board of directors, because we have an election every December. And so on January the 1st, in the Lincoln Memorial Room, we have a receiving line with all the president, the vice presidents, and the board of directors who are present. And the members go down the receiving line, introduce themselves, and shake their hands. And it's really a wonderful tradition. And so this is the board photograph that we had for the current sitting president, who's there in the middle in the front row, Charles Davidson, who will be leaving office in December. So we still do that today, which is nice. So the room is now used for many things, food and beverage and things like that. But New Year's Day, it still becomes a special room and a special space. So that's the program for the day. So if you do get the chance to come into the League House, go see the room. It is just, like I say, there's nothing else like it anyplace else in the country. So and remember, November 24th, 1917, and this video is airing on November 23rd. So just a day before the 103rd anniversary of the dedication of the Memorial Room, but we think of it as the Lincoln Memorial Room. Okay? All right. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you found that interesting. I hadn't done something architectural like that in a while, so we'll see what happens next week. I'll keep that one a secret, and I do know what it is, yes. No problems there. So thank you for watching. We really do appreciate it, and thanks to the Legacy Foundation for sponsoring this series of programs on the Union League's history. So as we just learned this week, things are a little rough out there, folks. So stay safe and stay healthy and stay well. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye now.